Why isolation at the top creates emotional deserts. There's a disturbing pattern nobody talks about. The higher someone climbs, the emptier their eyes become. It's not imagination. It's not coincidence. Look at any Fortune 500 CEO, any world leader, any person who controls the fate of thousands. There's something missing behind those calculated smiles. Something human that got left behind on the climb up. The brutal truth is this: power doesn't just change what you do, it rewires who you are at a neurological level. Your brain physically restructures itself to handle the impossible weight of decisions that destroy lives. And here's the twisted part: it does this by systematically shutting down the circuits that make you feel those consequences. It's not evil, it's survival adaptation taken to a terrifying extreme. Recent neuroscience research revealed something chilling. Scientists scanned the brains of high-ranking executives while showing them images of human suffering. The regions responsible for empathy and emotional resonance showed dramatically reduced activity compared to average people. But here's what makes it truly disturbing. These weren't psychopaths from birth. These were normal people whose brains had been fundamentally altered by the experience of wielding power over others. When you're responsible for mass layoffs, when you sign orders that end careers and shatter families, your psyche develops a protective callus. It has to, otherwise you'd collapse under the moral weight. So your brain creates distance, transforms people into data points, suffering into statistics. It's psychological armor, but the cost is your humanity itself. Law 15 of power teaches us to crush our enemies completely. But what Robert Greene doesn't emphasize is the internal transformation required to execute this law. To completely destroy another human being, you must first destroy your ability to see them as human. You must train yourself to view their pain as irrelevant, their pleas as noise, their existence as merely an obstacle to remove. Think about Lyndon B. Johnson. Before reaching the presidency, he was known for his warmth and personal connections. But the Vietnam War transformed him. Each escalation, each body count report, each decision to send more young men to die required him to disconnect further from the human cost. By the end, aides described him as hollow, mechanically going through motions, unable to process the magnitude of suffering his decisions had caused. The isolation accelerates this process. When you reach certain levels of power, genuine human connection becomes impossible. Every interaction is filtered through agendas and hierarchies. People stop being honest with you because honesty becomes dangerous. You're surrounded by mirrors, reflecting only what you want to see, until you forget what reality actually looks like. The practical action here is uncomfortable. Identify where you're building emotional walls as protection. Where have you started seeing people as functions rather than humans? It's necessary for certain decisions, but deadly if it becomes your default mode. Recognize the pattern before it consumes you entirely. If this recognition unsettles you, leave the word cold in the comments. Hit that like button if you're starting to see this mechanism operating in your own climb. Subscribe, because what comes next reveals how power literally hijacks your perception of truth itself. How power rewires your brain into a weapon. Here's what they don't teach you in business school or leadership seminars. Power is a drug, and like any drug, it fundamentally alters your brain chemistry. The rush you feel when someone obeys your command, when your decision moves markets, when your word becomes law, that's dopamine flooding your system. And your brain, like any addict's brain, starts demanding more. Neuroscientists have documented something they call power intoxication syndrome. It's not a metaphor. People in positions of sustained authority show measurable changes in their prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for impulse control and moral reasoning. The more power you accumulate, the more this region shows reduced activity. You literally lose the ability to consider consequences the way normal people do. There's a conspiracy theory that's harder to dismiss than most. Some researchers suggest that ancient mystery schools and secret societies understood this neurological corruption. They developed specific rituals, forced humiliations, and reality check mechanisms to prevent their most powerful members from losing touch completely. Why? Because they'd seen empires collapse when leaders went insane with unchecked authority. Look at the trajectory of John DeLorean, brilliant engineer, charismatic leader, illusionary thinker. But as his power grew, so did his detachment from reality. He started believing his own mythology, making increasingly reckless decisions, surrounding himself with yes-men who validated his delusions. His downfall wasn't moral failure, it was cognitive corruption caused by too much power with too little accountability. Law 27 of power states, play on people's need to believe to create a cult-like following. But there's a hidden danger here. When you successfully create that cult of personality, when people genuinely start believing you're infallible, your brain starts believing it too. The line between strategic performance and actual delusion dissolves completely. Studies on corporate leadership reveal something terrifying. CEOs who stay in power for extended periods show progressively worse decision-making abilities. Not because they're aging, but because their reality testing mechanisms atrophy. When nobody contradicts you for years, when every idea you have gets implemented regardless of quality, your brain stops fact-checking itself. You become algorithmically optimized for confidence without competence. The psychological mechanism is elegant and horrifying. Every time you exercise power successfully, your brain releases reward chemicals. Over time, you become addicted to that feeling. But like any addiction, you need bigger doses to feel the same high. So you seek more power, make bolder moves, take more extreme positions. Not because they're strategically sound, but because your brain is chasing the chemical rush. The practical action is brutal. Create forced accountability structures. Find people who can challenge you without fear of consequences. Not advisors who depend on you. Not subordinates who fear you, but genuine equals who will call out your bullshit. It goes against every instinct of power accumulation, but it's the only antidote to cognitive corruption. If you've already noticed your decisions becoming more extreme, your confidence outpacing your competence, you're experiencing the early stages. Drop the word rewired in the comments if you recognize this pattern. Like this video if you're willing to install reality checks before it's too late. Subscribe because the next revelation shows how the loneliness of power manufactures the very monsters we fear. Why the powerful can't afford compassion. Here's the paradox that breaks most people who reach the top. The qualities that make you human are exactly the qualities that make you vulnerable. Compassion becomes a liability. Empathy becomes a weapon your enemies use against you. Kindness becomes proof of weakness that gets exploited until you're destroyed. It's not that powerful people choose to be cold. They learn through brutal experience that warmth is punished. Every CEO who showed mercy to failing employees watched competitors poach their market share. Every political leader who prioritized humanitarian concerns over strategic advantage lost power to someone more ruthless. Every general who hesitated because of civilian casualties got replaced by someone who wouldn't. The system doesn't reward goodness. It systematically eliminates it. There's a documented phenomenon in game theory called the compassion trap. When you're playing against opponents who operate without moral constraints, having moral constraints guarantees your defeat. It's mathematical. If you won't lie, and they will, they control the narrative. If you won't betray, and they will, they eliminate you first. Compassion in asymmetrical power dynamics is essentially volunteering to lose. Consider the case of Gerald Ratner, British jewelry tycoon, built an empire through charisma and connection with customers. Then, in one moment of honest compassion, he admitted publicly that some of his products were cheap. He was being authentic, relatable, human. The market destroyed him. His company lost hundreds of millions overnight. The lesson was clear. Honesty and compassion are luxuries the powerful cannot afford. Law 3 of power warns us, conceal your intentions. But the deeper implication is about concealing your humanity itself. Your genuine feelings, your real concerns, your actual values, all of these become vulnerabilities that skilled operators will identify and exploit. The most successful, powerful people aren't just hiding their strategies, they're hiding their souls. Some historians argue that this is why secret societies and elite networks develop such bizarre rituals. Not for mystical reasons, but as controlled environments where powerful people can briefly be human without strategic consequences, where they can express doubt, show weakness, admit fear, because everyone in that room has mutually assured destruction capacity. It's the only safe space for vulnerability when you have real power. Think about it practically. If you're negotiating a billion-dollar deal, and you show genuine concern for the workers who'll be affected by layoffs, you've just signaled weakness. The other side will use that compassion to extract concessions. They'll make you choose between your values and your victory. And if you choose values, you lose the deal. Someone else makes it without those constraints, and those workers lose their jobs anyway. Your compassion accomplished nothing except your own defeat. The practical action here is coldly strategic. Compartmentalize your humanity. Create spaces where you can be compassionate without strategic cost. Family, trusted friends, anonymous charity. But in the arena of power, treat compassion like classified information. Deploy it only when it serves your objectives, never when it creates vulnerability. If you've ever been punished for showing kindness, if you've learned the hard way that mercy gets weaponized, drop the word survival in the comments. Like this video. If you understand why the powerful seem heartless, subscribe, because the final piece reveals whether it's possible to keep your soul while playing this brutal game. What if staying human is the ultimate power move? Here's the twist nobody sees coming. Maybe the real power isn't in becoming cold, but in staying warm while everyone else freezes. Maybe the ultimate strategic advantage isn't emotional shutdown, but emotional mastery. What if the most dangerous player isn't the one who feels nothing, but the one who feels everything and weaponizes it with precision? Think about this carefully. Every cold, calculated leader operates from the same playbook. They're predictable in their ruthlessness, but someone who can genuinely connect, who understands emotional dynamics at a deep level, who can be authentically human when everyone expects a robot, that person has access to power moves the cold ones can't even comprehend. Unpredictability rooted in authentic humanity is the rarest weapon. There's emerging research on what they call integrated leadership. Leaders who maintain emotional intelligence while exercising power don't just perform better ethically, they outperform strategically. Why? Because they retain the ability to read rooms, understand motivations, predict reactions. The cold leaders are flying blind, making decisions based on spreadsheets while missing the human variables that actually determine outcomes. Look at Herb Kelleher, founder of Southwest Airlines. He built one of the most profitable airlines in history by doing the opposite of conventional CEO wisdom. He treated employees like family, showed genuine emotion, admitted mistakes publicly. Competitors thought he was weak, but his humanity created fanatical loyalty that translated into operational excellence no amount of cold efficiency could match. Law 13 of power teaches, when asking for help, appeal to people's self-interest, never to their mercy or gratitude. But here's the hidden level. The truly sophisticated understand that people's self-interest includes their emotional needs. Someone who makes them feel valued, seen, human. That person becomes irreplaceable. Coldness might get compliance. Warmth gets devotion. There are whispers about certain elite training programs that teach the opposite of what you'd expect. Not how to suppress emotions, but how to master them completely. How to feel deeply without being controlled by feelings. How to connect authentically while maintaining strategic clarity. They're creating a new breed of leader who has all the power of the cold ones plus the weapons they've abandoned. But here's the razor's edge. This only works if it's real. Faking warmth while being cold inside is just standard manipulation that people eventually detect. The real power comes from genuinely maintaining your humanity while developing the discipline to not let it paralyze your decisions. It's exponentially harder than just going cold, which is why so few achieve it. The final practical action is the hardest. Develop emotional strength, not emotional numbness. Train yourself to feel the full weight of difficult decisions without being crushed by them. To acknowledge the human cost without letting it prevent necessary action. To maintain compassion without letting it become a manipulable weakness. It's the narrow path between monster and victim. The ultimate truth is this: you don't have to choose between power and humanity. You can integrate both. If you're strong enough to carry the weight, the cold ones took the easy path. You can take the harder one and end up somewhere they can't reach. If you're committed to this harder path, drop the word integrated in the comments. Like this video. If you refuse to sacrifice your soul for success, subscribe to keep exploring these deeper levels of power that most never discover. And share this with someone climbing who needs to know there's another way before they make the irreversible choice.